2012, a reporter knocked on the door of a modest apartment in Palo Alto, California. The door opened. Standing there, in a gray t-shirt and jeans, was Mark Zuckerberg, already worth $8 billion. The journalist asked the obvious question, why doesn't a billionaire own a home? Zuckerberg smiled. I just don't spend a lot of time thinking about my house, he said. We grow up with a narrative etched into our minds. Wealth means ownership. The mansion on the hill, the penthouse suite, the sprawling estate with iron gates and marble fountains. Ownership equals success. Renting equals failure. But here's what nobody tells you. The billionaires don't believe it. Not the young tech founders, not the hedge fund managers, not even the old money dynasties. Take Warren Buffett, the fifth richest person on earth, worth $120 billion. He lives in the same 5-bedroom house in Omaha, Nebraska, that he bought in 1958 for $31,500. Adjusted for inflation, that's about $330,000 today. When asked why, Buffett has a one-sentence answer. I'm happy there. I'd move if I thought I'd be happier someplace else. But he's left something unsaid. That house isn't an investment. It's not growing his wealth. Let's run the numbers. Imagine you're worth $10 million. You could buy a luxury home for $5 million outright, half your net worth tied up in bricks and mortar. If you buy, you own the home, but your $5 million just sits there. Real estate appreciates at roughly 3 to 4% per year on average. After a decade, your house is worth about $7 million. Now the other path. You rent for $15,000 a month. $1, $8 million over 10 years. But your $5 million stays invested in the stock market, earning an average 8% annual return. You end up nearly $2 million richer by renting. And that's a conservative estimate. If your investments perform better, or if you own a business that compounds faster, the gap widens. But the calculation goes deeper. Ownership isn't just about money in versus money out. It's about liquidity. A house is an illiquid asset. You can't sell a bedroom when you need cash. In 2008, when the financial crisis hit, thousands of wealthy individuals watched their net worth collapse. Not because their businesses failed, but because their capital was buried in real estate they couldn't liquidate fast enough. Then there's the hidden tax, ego. Owning a mansion means maintaining it, staffing it, securing it. A $20 million estate doesn't run itself. It demands gardeners, housekeepers, security personnel, pool technicians, HVAC specialists. Renters pay one check. The landlord deals with the burst pipes, the broken AC, the leaking roof. For a billionaire whose time is worth $10,000 an hour, spending a weekend coordinating contractors is a 6-figure loss. And then there's mobility. Billionaires don't live in one place. They operate globally. New York for finance, San Francisco for tech, London for deals, Singapore for expansion. Warren Buffett's Omaha home cost him $31,500 in 1958. He's never upgraded Mark Zuckerberg, rented a 1-bedroom in Palo Alto until Facebook hit $1 billion. Over 40% of billionaires under 50 rent their primary residence at some point. Jeff Bezos owns multiple properties now, but in Amazon's early years, he rented. Elon Musk recently sold all 7 of his homes and announced he'd rent going forward. Possessions weigh you down, he tweeted. It wasn't philosophy. But here's where the psychology gets interesting. Renting isn't about deprivation. These billionaires can afford anything. The point is that owning a palace doesn't make you richer. It makes you poorer. Wealth isn't what you possess. Consider this. A $10 million home generates 0 income. It just sits there, costing you money. This is the billionaire's secret. They don't think like consumers. Consumers buy things. Investors buy cash flow. A mansion is a thing. A rental agreement is a contract you can exit. Yet the cultural pressure is overwhelming. Show up to a business dinner and admit you rent and watch the room's perception shift. You don't own? There's judgment, confusion, an unspoken assumption that you've failed. This is why the billionaire rental paradox stays hidden. It contradicts the American dream. It undermines the real estate industry's entire sales pitch. So why do billionaires rent? Not because they're frugal, not because they're humble, Because they've done the math, and the math is cold and clear. Every dollar you lock in a house is a dollar that stops working. But the story doesn't end with math, because there's a deeper reason, one that has nothing to do with spreadsheets and everything to do with power. To understand this, you have to understand what billionaires actually optimize for. It's not comfort, it's not status, it's optionality. The ability to move, to pivot, to disappear overnight if the situation demands it. When you own a $50 million penthouse, you're anchored. Property taxes alone can run $1 million a year. Maintenance, staff, insurance, another $1 million. That's $2 million in sunk costs just to keep the lights on. But when you rent that same penthouse through an LLC, the company pays. The rent is a business expense. It flows through the books, reduces taxable income, and when the lease ends, you walk away with zero liability. This is the first principle: separation. The ultra-wealthy don't mix personal life with personal assets. Everything is held at arm's length, through entities, through trusts, through structures most people have never heard of. Take Steve Jobs. At the peak of his wealth, he lived in a modest home in Palo Alto, bought in the 1990s for under $2 million. No mansion, no compound, because owning real estate wasn't the point. Jobs kept his wealth in Apple stock, in assets that compounded. Real estate in Silicon Valley appreciated, sure, but Apple stock returned 20,000% over the same period. The choice was obvious. Then there's the question of risk. When you own property, you're exposed. Lawsuits, divorces, creditors, they all come for your assets. A billionaire's net worth makes them a target, and a mansion is an easy bullseye. In 2019, a hedge fund manager was sued for $100 million. His personal home was listed in the filing. Within 48 hours, he had transferred the deed to a family trust in Delaware. Owning a $10 million home costs $300,000 yearly in taxes, insurance, and upkeep. That same capital invested at 8% annual return generates $800,000 profit. Instead, real estate ties up wealth. The median billionaire keeps only 6% in property. Renting solves this. The lease isn't in your name. The LLC that holds it is layered behind other LLCs, registered in states with strict privacy laws. Good luck finding the beneficiary. This is how Roman Abramovich operated for years. His London mansion, leased through a British Virgin Islands entity. His New York penthouse, held by a Cayman Islands trust. He never owned anything directly. When sanctions hit in 2022, investigators couldn't freeze his homes because technically he didn't own them. The structures did, and structures can be dissolved, moved, or renamed in hours. But there's an even deeper layer. Billionaires don't just avoid ownership for tax or legal reasons. They avoid it because ownership is a trap. It ties up capital, creates emotional attachment, and limits your options. Warren Buffett still lives in the house he bought in 1958 for $31,500. Not because he's frugal, because selling it and buying something bigger would be a distraction. Every dollar matters, and every decision is calculated. Compare that to the average American homeowner who pours $50,000 into kitchen renovations and patio upgrades. Money that could have compounded at 10% a year in the stock market, but instead sits frozen in granite countertops. Billionaires see this clearly. A home is a consumption asset, not an investment. It doesn't generate cash flow. It doesn't scale. It just sits there, demanding more money while your actual wealth stagnates. So they rent, and they pour the difference into businesses, stocks, private equity, assets that double every 7 years. That $50 million penthouse? They'd rather put that into a startup that becomes a unicorn. Then there's mobility. In 2020, when California raised taxes, dozens of billionaires left the state within months. Elon Musk moved to Texas. Larry Ellison moved to Hawaii. If they had owned $100 million estates, they'd have been locked in. Selling takes months. Capital gains taxes would eat 20% of the profit. Instead, they vanished overnight, and California lost billions in tax revenue. This is the power of renting. It's not about money. It's about freedom. The freedom to leave a bad market, a bad jurisdiction, a bad situation. The freedom to always be moving toward the next opportunity. But the ultimate reason is this: billionaires don't want to be found. Ownership creates a paper trail. Deeds, tax records, public filings. All of it searchable, all of it vulnerable. Renting through layered entities keeps you invisible. When Bloomberg tried to map the residences of the world's 500 richest people in 2021, they could only confirm addresses for 62 of them. The rest were ghosts, living in properties owned by entities buried 6 layers deep. So here's the paradox. The richest people on Earth live in homes they don't own, surrounded by things they don't need, optimizing for a game most people don't even know they're playing. And while the middle class saves for a down payment, sacrificing liquidity and decades of potential returns, billionaires rent, invest, and multiply. The gap widens, not because they're smarter, because they're playing an entirely different game. Business rent is 100% tax deductible in most jurisdictions. Mortgage interest deduction caps at $750,000 in the U.S. corporate lease payments reduce taxable income dollar for dollar. The psychology runs deeper than spreadsheets. For most people, a home represents safety, security, proof of arrival. It's the American dream encoded in mortgage documents and white picket fences. But billionaires don't chase emotional security through property. They've already secured survival. Now they're optimizing for something else entirely, maximum optionality. The freedom to move, to pivot, to seize opportunities the moment they appear. Consider Larry Ellison, founder of Oracle, worth over $140 billion. He owns dozens of properties worldwide. Estates, islands, even 98% of the Hawaiian island of Lanai. Yet his primary residence in Malibu? The structure matters. When a billionaire rents from their own corporate entity, they create a tax-advantaged loop. The corporation deducts expenses, depreciation, maintenance, utilities. None of that exists for a personal homeowner. It's a game of legal architecture. The IRS code runs 2,600 pages for individuals. For corporations, over 70,000 pages of deductions, loopholes, and optimization strategies written by lobbyists who represent the ultra-wealthy. Now layer in leverage, the secret weapon. When you buy a home with a mortgage, you're using leverage, borrowing to amplify your investment. But the math only works if property appreciates faster than your interest rate plus opportunity cost. Historically, housing returns about 3-5% annually after inflation. Your mortgage rate? Currently around 7%. You're paying 7% to chase 3-5%. The math doesn't close. You're hemorrhaging capital for the privilege of ownership. But billionaires use leverage differently. They borrow against liquid assets, stocks, bonds, business equity, at rates as low as 1-2%. Then they deploy that borrowed capital into ventures, returning 15%, 30%, sometimes 200%. The spread is everything. This is called securities-based lending. You pledge your portfolio as collateral, the bank gives you cash at near zero rates, and you never trigger a taxable event. No capital gains, no income, just liquidity on demand. Elon Musk used this exact strategy in 2020. He owned zero cash, yet lived in a $50,000 rental near SpaceX headquarters in Texas, a prefab box smaller than most garages. The rental cost him $4,200 a month. If he'd bought a $10 million mansion in Austin, what a CEO is supposed to own, he'd have tied up $2 million in down payment. It's not frugality. It's ruthless capital efficiency. Every dollar has a job. And that job is never to sit idle in drywall and landscaping when it could be multiplying in a high-growth asset. Then there's the maintenance trap. A luxury home doesn't maintain itself. Property taxes in high-end neighborhoods run $50,000 to $200,000 annually. Insurance, landscaping, repairs, staff. A billionaire's time is worth $10,000 per hour. Why spend it managing contractors? When you rent, all of that becomes the landlord's problem. A pipe bursts, one phone call. The billionaire's attention remains on the $500 million acquisition closing next week, not on plumbing. This is time leverage, the hidden multiplier nobody discusses. If Bezos spends 10 hours managing a home repair, he's lost $100,000 in opportunity cost. The decision to rent isn't about saving money on housing. Personal assets can be seized in lawsuits. Rentals cannot. Jeff Bezos faced 9 separate lawsuits in 2022 alone. Trusts and LLCs own the contracts, not the individuals. But here's where it gets darker. The same system that allows billionaires to rent and optimize is rigged against the middle class trying to do the same. In San Francisco, the median rent is $3,500 a month. That's $42,000 a year for a one-bedroom. To save a 20% down payment on a median $1, $2 million home, you'd need to set aside $240,000 while paying that rent. So the working class rents out of necessity, hemorrhaging wealth to landlords who build equity on their backs, while billionaires rent by choice, keeping capital free to compound. Same word, opposite outcomes. And the tax code reinforces the divide. Homeowners get a mortgage interest deduction capped at $750,000 of debt. Sounds generous, until you realize billionaires borrowing $50 million against their stock portfolio pay zero taxes on that borrowed money. This is the buy, borrow, die strategy. Buy assets that appreciate. Borrow against them tax-free. Die and pass them to heirs with a stepped-up basis, erasing all capital gains. It's perfectly legal, written into the code by decades of lobbying. And it requires one thing the middle class doesn't have: enough capital to never need to sell. Meanwhile, first-time homebuyers are sold a dream. Build equity. Stop throwing money away on rent. Own a piece of the American dream. The advice isn't wrong for everyone, but it ignores the single most important variable: opportunity cost. If your down payment earns more invested elsewhere than your home appreciates, renting is mathematically superior. But that requires liquidity, discipline, and a market that doesn't punish renters with runaway inflation. This creates a two-tier system. The wealthy rent because they have options. The middle class owns because the tax code, the banks, and the culture all push them into a single leveraged bet they can't afford to lose. And here's the cruelest irony. Homeownership was sold as the path to wealth. For boomers, it worked. A house bought in 1975 for $50,000 is worth $1 million today. The system rewarded them. But the door has closed. In 1975, the median home cost $9 times median income. Today, it's 2 times. Rents consume 35% of income versus 22% then. The math that built generational wealth no longer works. Meanwhile, the billionaire renter isn't fleeing homeownership out of fear. He's wielding it as a tool. He rents where he lives, but he owns where others live. He collects rent checks while paying rent himself. Take Jeff Bezos. For years, he rented in Seattle while Amazon stock exploded. Once liquid, he bought not a home, but a $23 million estate he rarely visits. It's a trophy, not a residence. Mark Zuckerberg rented a modest Palo Alto home until 2014, years after Facebook's IPO. Why? Because his $5 billion in stock was compounding at 20% annually. Buying a mansion would have cost him $100 million in opportunity. Warren Buffett is the exception that proves the rule. He's lived in the same Omaha house since 1958. It cost $31,500. He calls it the third best investment he ever made. He kept every dollar working. Berkshire Hathaway grew into a $1 trillion empire while Buffett stayed in a 5-bedroom house with no fence. The home didn't make him rich. Capital discipline did. Manhattan luxury rentals average $15,000 per month versus $8 million to buy the same unit billionaires can write off rental expenses through corporate structures. Homeowners cannot. The top 1% hold only 8% of their wealth in primary residences versus 63% for median households. So when a billionaire rents, he's making a calculated trade. He gives up pride of ownership, tax deductions, and social status in exchange for speed, liquidity, and optionality. The things you can't buy back once you're locked in. But the system doesn't reward that choice for everyone. Renters face discrimination in credit scores, loan approvals, even job applications. Homeownership is coded as responsibility, stability, adulthood. Renting is seen as failure, no matter your bank account. And landlords know they have leverage. In 24 states, it's legal to reject tenants for any reason. No pets, no kids, no explanations. The billionaire renter can negotiate. The teacher cannot. Meanwhile, rent inflation has outpaced wages for 2 decades. In Manhattan, the median rent is $4,200. In San Francisco, $3,800. That's 60% of the median household income before taxes. The billionaire renting a $10,000 penthouse is spending zero. 0.01% of his net worth on housing. The barista renting a studio for $2,000 is spending 40%. Same word, different universe. So the question isn't why billionaires rent. It's why the rest of us are told we must own. And the answer is control. A renter can leave a bad job, a dying city, a collapsed market. A homeowner is anchored. The 30-year mortgage is a 30-year promise to stay productive, compliant, and local. The banks and employers love that. Billionaires, by contrast, have geographic arbitrage. They rent in London, Monaco, Aspen, Dubai, wherever the tax laws, the weather, or the deal flow favors them that quarter. Roots are a liability when the world is your market. But here's what the system won't tell you. Wealth isn't about what you own. It's about what you control. Bezos doesn't own the Seattle skyline. He controls the capital that could buy it 10 times over. Owning a home gives you shelter and an asset. Controlling liquid capital gives you options, speed, and leverage. One is a place to sleep. The other is power. So the billionaire rents not because he's cheap or afraid or unconventional. He rents because he's optimized. Every dollar has a job, and the job of a dollar is never to sit idle in drywall. The middle class, meanwhile, has been sold the opposite doctrine, that ownership equals success, that debt is good debt, that your home is your biggest asset, and for millions, it's the only asset, which makes it a trap. Because when the market crashes, when the job disappears, when the neighborhood decays, you can't liquidate a house in a week. You can liquidate stock. That's the difference between wealth and net worth on paper. The billionaire rents because he learned what the system doesn't teach. Flexibility is more valuable than ownership. Liquidity is more powerful than pride. And freedom, true financial freedom, comes not from owning things, but from never needing to. So if you're told that renting is throwing money away, ask yourself, throwing it away from what? A leveraged, illiquid asset you can't sell, can't move, and will spend decades paying interest on? That's not security.